I am a 17-year-old boy that lives in a small suburban area. My parents are now on day 4 of their 7-day cruise. I finally convinced them to let me stay home alone without any supervision. Now I am regretting it. It all started the day before my parents' departure. I kept hearing footsteps above me even though we live in a 1-story home. My mom kept trying to convince me that it was just the house creaking, but for some reason I had this unsettling feeling that there was actually something up there. After hours of convincing, my mom finally agreed to call pest control to come and see if there was any traces of rodents and pests trapped in our attic. The pest control arrived later that afternoon to check the attic. They didn't find anything out of the ordinary, but said that they would bomb the attic as a precautionary. We had to leave the house for an hour, which was fine with me considering it would give me peace of mind. We got back to the house about an hour and a half later to a note on the counter saying that the attic was bombed and that we shouldn't have any more problems in the near future. That night I slept peacefully. The next morning my parents left for their cruise, leaving me home alone. Night 1. I was in my room playing video games when I heard the footsteps again. It was brief, but I know what I heard. I convinced myself that maybe it was whatever rodent up there dying out, and that I should just forget about it. So I did, and the rest of the night was quiet. Night 2. I left the hall light on, closed and locked my bedroom door, and began to try to fall asleep. I have to say it was pretty weird being in the house totally alone, especially because of how quiet our neighborhood is at night. As I was falling asleep, I heard something that made me sit up in my bed. At that moment, as I looked toward the light through the bottom of my door, I saw a shadow pass by. I shot up out of my bed to ensure that I had locked my door. Thankfully, I did. I tiptoed back to my bed and sat there waiting for some sort of sound to emerge. That was when I heard our refrigerator door open and gently close. I knew it was the fridge because my room is right next to the kitchen, and I've heard this noise plenty of times. At this point, I felt helpless, so of course I called the cops. After 30 minutes of waiting, they finally arrived. They searched the house and found nothing. They said there was no signs of forced entry and that I was probably just on edge since it was my first time staying alone. After they left, I knew something still didn't feel right. I barely slept that night. Night 3. It was about 11 p.m. and I felt exhausted considering I had only gotten a few hours of sleep the previous night. I fell asleep without any problems. I woke up a few hours later with the feeling that I was being watched. I jumped out of my sleep and turned on my table lamp. Everything looked just as it did when I went to bed. I fell back to sleep, but this time with the lamp on. Day 4. The next morning I woke up and got ready for school. As I went to leave my room, I noticed the door was unlocked. Now when I tell you that even though I was exhausted, I know for a fact that I triple-checked the lock on my bedroom door before I went to bed. I think someone watched me sleep. When I got home from school that day, there was several police cars on my street, which was rare because, as I mentioned before, I live in a small suburban area. I asked one of my neighbors who was standing outside if she knew what was going on. She said that someone discovered 2 bodies in the woods behind our neighborhood. She said, and that's when my whole body went numb, that it was 2 employees from the local pest control company. I am now at my aunt and uncle's, which is about 2 hours away from home. I am not sure what to make of all that has happened, but I do know that someone is living in my attic. It was the middle of the summer a few years back, and my parents were going out to play cards at their friend's house, roughly 40 minutes away. Now, being the teenager that I was at the time, I decided to yank out the small amount of weed I had and take a quick hit before watching the NBA Finals, Heat vs. Mavericks Game 3. I think I love basketball, but I guess this is an important law. Everything was going well, and of course I proceeded to get the munchies, as most people do. So I went to the McDonald's just a few blocks away to grab myself a double cheeseburger and junior chicken, and no, I didn't make him a gangbang. After enjoying my meal, I started my walk home. But this is where it all began. and it almost makes me sick just thinking about the events that unfolded before me in the next hour. I finally reached my street, and suddenly I noticed that on the other side of the road, there were a couple of men with their hoodies up, and of course, being as high as I was, I began to panic and walk a little faster, just thinking about every possible bad scenario that could happen, except for, of course, what was about to take place. The event that would change the way I feel about staying home alone ever again. I reached my house and punched in the garage door code to go inside, and with that, my curiosity piqued about the men, so I decided to turn around to see if they were still standing there. Unfortunately, they weren't. Instead, they had crossed the road and were walking toward my house. I closed the garage and began to panic, as any paranoid high person might do in a situation such as this. But to my surprise, nothing happened for the next half hour. I made sure all the doors were locked, as well as the windows, closed all the blinds, and decided to return to the basketball game and forget about the two people I subconsciously thought were after me. Suddenly I heard a knock on the door, and I sat frozen in my chair wondering who it might be. Is it my parents? Is it one of my friends? Is it the two men I saw just 30 minutes ago who scared the shit out of me? Yes, it must be the two men I saw with their hoodies up, I thought. One more knock, and then another, and then one more, and finally the knocking stopped. Scared shitless, I muted to TV and just stared ahead, listening for any sounds that might appear out of the ordinary, but for the next 10 minutes, nothing. Too scared to watch TV downstairs, I headed up to my room and turned on my DS to play some online Mario Kart. The people were gone, right? Whoever knocked on the door surely wasn't going to come back, but just as I began a race, I heard a louder knock, followed by another, and then one more. I closed my DS shut and sat on my bed frozen with fear. Why the hell did I have to get stoned tonight? Why of all nights is this happening now? What do these people want? Here my curiosity rose again, and I decided to look out my upstairs window to see who was at the door, since if there were people at my front door, I would surely see them as they walked away. Peeking ever so slightly out of the corner of my window there, I saw him. One of the two men I saw earlier looking around my house, and then he stared right at me, or so I thought, perhaps just in my general direction, but he didn't see me. Oh God, what do I do? Obviously I freaked out at this point, and I proceeded to grab the mini baseball bat in my room, like it was really going to protect me, and just sat in my room waiting for them to possibly break through a window and get me. But once again silence ensued, and I was left to ponder what the hell was going on. Maybe he saw me and they decided to leave. Or maybe they saw my fear and realized I was their prime target. These questions, along with many others, flooded through my head like a terrifying tsunami, and nothing could deter me from such thoughts. And then my phone went off and nearly scared me half to death. It was my mom, and they said they were on their way home and had left 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes, I thought. 20 minutes, they'll be home and I'll be safe. Thank God. And then bang, bang. Two large banging noises came from my upstairs window, and I jumped like a petrified cat. Not knowing what to do, I had to peek out the blinds of my window to see what was happening, and not to my surprise, there they were, the two men, just standing there looking at me as if to say, "Yes, we're here, we see you, we know you're alone." I didn't know what to do, so I snuck downstairs and went to the kitchen for some unknown reason. At this point, I didn't even consider calling the cops as I was stoned, and I was paranoid, scared shitless, and what could the cops possibly do at this point anyway? I was so lost and confused. Suddenly I heard footsteps on my porch. Why were they on my back porch? Why? Seriously? The footsteps continued, and then they stopped. Frozen with the purest form of fear, I heard nothing for 5 to 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I walked over to my family room closer to where the porch was located, and I heard a very muffled talking. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were saying something. My parents will be home soon, I thought. Soon they'll be here, and these men will leave. And then I heard them, clear as day. "We know you're in there," they said. "All alone, aren't you?" I could hear them laughing. How could these sick people be getting enjoyment out of this? This is messed up. And then the most terrifying moment for me came when they began banging on the window in the family room, as well as trying to open the sliding screen door. I couldn't move, I couldn't think, I was too scared to do anything. And then the garage door began to open. My parents were home. The banging stopped, and I opened the garage door as quickly as I could. I told them to close the garage as quickly as possible and began freaking out, explaining everything about the two men who were outside. But then my mom asked me a question I didn't possibly consider. Have you been smoking pot? Your eyes are bloodshot and you smell like shit. Face palm, I completely forgot to put Vicine in my eyes and to mask the smell of the weed. I was too caught up in what was happening to remember to cover up the marijuana, and my parents, being the anti-weed individuals they are, blamed everything on the weed. They didn't believe me, but I told them to look in the backyard to see if there was any sign of these two men, but alas, there was not. The two men never came back, and to this day I always look over my shoulder when walking outside at night, and always have a sense of fear when I'm home alone, or just trying to sleep in general for that matter. This experience scared the living shit out of me, and I just can't believe it happened to me. Hey, say your home is the safest place in the world. That when all else fails, you can retreat to your own personal sanctuary to relax and be alone. I don't know if I wish I were alone right now. I live in a pretty safe neighborhood. It's the kind of place where people only live there so they can commute into the city for work. What I mean to say is that it's not the kind of place anyone thinks about as a home. There's nothing special about mine or anyone else's on the block. It's not even particularly nice. They're just houses. Despite that, I like to think that I rose above this. I won't say that you could hire me to decorate a home, but I've watched my fair share of home renovation shows. And after living here for almost my entire life, I think I've brought my very own charm to the place. I will admit, it had a lot more of that warmth when my kids still lived with me. Most recently, my daughter Emily had moved away to a college out of state to pursue a Bachelor of Arts. Still, I had lived alone previously, and I didn't mind too much. It's just unfamiliar to be alone after so long. So that's how I know, despite what the police say, I don't feel alone. It started about 2 weeks ago, regular as anything else. I had been lying in my bed reading a book when I heard a noise somewhere else in the house. Just some creaking floorboards. If I had been as paranoid as I am right now, I would have immediately thought of someone walking across the hardwood. But I chalked it up to the house settling and went to bed. That had to have been the first instance. Or maybe it was just the first time I noticed it. I mean, the house had made noises before, but it couldn't have been happening that long without me knowing. When I woke up the next morning, I had completely forgotten about the night previously before I noticed a notification on my phone from my home security system. My daughter had pushed for me to install something now that I was living alone, and I had relented, but it hadn't been very useful so far. However, now the phone said something I had never read before. Someone is outside 2:17 a.m. I immediately clicked on it to see what had happened, that maybe something had fallen in the night or one of my neighbors had come home late. The 30 seconds of footage was from one of my cameras pointing into my backyard, and it was dark. I didn't see anything obvious, so I chalked it up to a glitch and moved on with my day. The next morning though, the same thing happened. I woke up to another notification saying someone is outside 1:42 a.m. Again, there was nothing evident on the short slip of footage that the app had saved, so I thought that maybe my security system was glitched. This continued for another week before anything changed. After waking up to another someone is outside every morning, I had stopped checking the recordings. If the system was not going to record anything anyway, what was the point of even checking? I was debating even getting rid of the system and replacing it completely when I noticed something off in my kitchen. The door was open ever so slightly, the wind brushing the curtains gently. If I hadn't not touched that door in over 2 months, I probably wouldn't have even realized it. I locked the door quickly and went to my phone to check the notification from last night. Someone is outside 3:13 a.m. The video was almost the same as the others, A dark view of my backyard save for the dim light of the lamp in my living room that I had forgotten to turn off last night. That slight change revealed everything though. The app was right, there was someone outside. Not just someone, but hundreds of people. All pushed close to each other to fit as many of them into my backyard as possible. They all were wearing different variations of the same outfit, a hoodie and a pair of jeans. Some of them might have been wearing jackets instead, but all the clothes were dark and covered most of their body, all except their face. You know, despite this all, I might have preferred that they were wearing masks. Horror movies prepare you for masks. They all looked directly into the camera. They weren't smiling or talking, they just stood there staring with those eyes. There wasn't that effect you find on dark cameras, the red eyes you see when someone takes a flash photograph of you, or the reflection you get on a security feed. All the eyes were dark, dead. Then the footage ended. I quickly went back through all the other saved footage, and at first it looked like last night was a one-time occurrence. But I double-checked and upped the exposure of some of the frames. The first night there was only one person, tucked away at the back of my fence in nothing but a hoodie and jeans. Every single night after though, more people seemingly flooded into my backyard. They never moved and tried to stay as far away from my house as possible. Obviously, I called the police. I told them that I was being stalked or harassed, and that people had broken into my house. They searched every inch of my house and couldn't find a single thing stolen or moved. There wasn't a single sign of a break-in other than the open sliding glass door that I had shut. When I tried to show them what the cameras had recorded, they said they couldn't see anything, but that I could call them if anything else happened. The look the officer gave me when he said that almost felt like the kind of pity you give someone losing your mind. I couldn't sleep that night. All night, I could hear floorboards creaking and pipes moving. Even though I had locked the door to my bedroom, I felt like there was something in the walls and ceiling from every side of me. People shimmying through tight spaces and pushing up against each other. I even thought for a second that it might just be the house settling, but I was awake when the notification came this time. Someone is inside 2:57 a.m. When I clicked the notification to see what the app had recorded, it was just a black screen. But the audio had picked something up. It sounded like hundreds of bodies moving against each other, each trying to fit inside some small space. The bones breaking and skin ripping as the bodies squeezed themselves between each other was the only thing for those 30 seconds. The police never found anything inside my house when I called them again. They set up someone outside in case someone tries to break in, but I don't need them outside. It's the fact that they're on the inside. I don't know if I'd want another person in here though. I worry that it's becoming too full. The videos are dark still, and I don't know which camera is recording them. I only have cameras outside my house. The walls are bulging now, and I don't know what to do. I have nowhere else to go, and I wish I were all alone. This is an ex-landlord story. I moved out of my apartment a few years ago and rented a room in an old guy's house so I could afford to pay cash for a van. My dream is to do the cross-country thing while I'm still able. I had never rented a room from anyone before, but an old New York guy named Dave was very nice. We became good friends. He's not a jokester, so I believe his story. Back in the 70s, he and his wife had separated. He was living in a mobile home park in a rural part of New York. At this time, many people in his area were seeing strange lights in the sky and reporting all sorts of weird occurrences. His kids would take turns spending the night at his place. On one occasion, a large cat got under the mobile home and popped out a floor register in his daughter's room. It scared them to death. One night, his daughter, who was about 9 years old, was spending the night with him and sleeping soundly. Dave was watching a football game and drinking a bud in the adjoining living room area. All of a sudden, he heard the most blood-curdling scream he had ever heard. "Daddy, help me." Dave leaped up and threw the bedroom door open, fully expecting to see another cat had once again popped up through the floor register. His daughter was completely hysterical and reaching for him. Dave held her and asked, "What in the world is wrong? Did the cat come back?" She told him she had been fighting the little man and kept hitting him over and over again, but he refused to get off her bed. Dave explained to her that maybe it was another cat that came up through the register, or that she was just having a horrible nightmare. Dave looked over at the floor register, and it was still in place. His daughter was drenched in sweat and tears. He carried her to his bedroom, tucked her in, and waited for her to fall asleep. Finally, he was able to return to his much-anticipated football game. Dave told me he sat on his couch with popcorn and beer in hand, but could not forget the look on his young daughter's face. He grabbed a baseball bat and thought surely that stray cat had found a way back up through the floor register. He quietly opened his daughter's bedroom door, and he told me his heart just sank. On the bed was a shiny man approximately 2 to 2.5 feet tall staring at him. It had no discernible features but just turned in his direction. Whatever this was, it was on his daughter's pillow. Its head was egg-shaped. Dave said he'll never forget that, he said. I closed the bedroom door and sat on the couch, watching the game like nothing happened. I must have been in shock. When I moved to Milan in 2019, I was living in this very old building for a month. Is an Airbnb anyway. One afternoon I was studying, and for some reason I was feeling very tired, so I thought I'll take a quick nap. Just as I thought to do so, I noticed the doorknob of my room get twisted, and the door slowly open with the most horrible creaking sound. I almost shat myself because I knew there was nobody living there in that entire apartment. I got so scared I screamed, "Who's there?" Just an overall very uncomfortable incident that I'll never forget. I was home alone one day in the dead of winter in Canada and laying in bed watching TV. Suddenly my TV shut off and I heard a woman scream from under my bed. The most blood-curdling scream. My cat also ran out of my room like he was petrified. There have been no explanations. Lots of other weird stuff happened. 2 pages turning in a book, ticks on the wall that would move around the room, things turning on and off, weird shadows, things grabbing my feet. This just happened to me yesterday, November 2nd. For context, I am a 15-year-old female, and for the last 2 weeks, I've been living with my grandparents. I was having issues with my parents. Now my grandparents were having their floors reinstalled, so naturally they went to one of those hardware stores to get the work done, namely Lowe's. I catch the bus home, so I greeted my grandfather, who was leaving out to take care of some personal business, and then my grandmother. She was supervising the workers to make sure that they wouldn't damage anything, seeing as though she's extremely paranoid. About 20 minutes later I had eaten and had just laid down for a nap when my grandmother came in to inform me that she would be going to the bank, which was 2 cities away in Westchester. She told me that the workers would be in the back of the house, which I knew because I could clearly hear the machinery and such coming from that area. My temporary room, dubbed the middle room, was exactly in the middle of the house, hence the name. There are 2 doors to enter my room. Through the door on the right that connects to the front of the house, or the door on the left that connects to the back of the house. My bed is across the room from both doors, but closest to the frontmost door, as the head of the bed rests against the expanse of wall by the front door. My dog's cage sits in front of the back door, and if you were to open it, his house wouldn't obstruct the door. However, it would stop any advance into the room, as an entertainment center and desk sits on opposite sides of it. Of course I feel safe and turn my back to both doors as I rested on my side and listened to a playlist on my iPod with earplugs in, which is a big mistake. I mean, I am in an unlocked room with middle-aged men in the house whom I'm not familiar with. About 20 minutes after my grandmother had left, there were a series of knocks at the front door of my room that scared me shitless, as no one in the house bothered to knock. I realized that it was most likely one of the workers and the reason why they had knocked. The back door obstructs entrance into the room, but my back was to it, so I didn't see them attempt to open it. Also, the front door was blocked by the heavy clothes that I hang on the hook nearest it. My heart sank to my toes as I saw the door crack. They had knocked hard enough to force it open. They didn't speak, and I sat there quietly, petrified and not knowing what to do. I'm scarcely 5'3", 130 pounds soaking wet and a girl. In addition, I was in nothing but a short nightgown and I was defenseless. I wouldn't be able to fight off anyone, least of all a full-grown man. My dog is a Maltese and he makes noise over every little noise, and he's only 7 pounds but his bark is loud and low. He growled and stalked over to the door with his hair on end. The knocking stopped immediately. The person never said a word, but I heard their heavy, slow footsteps recede to the living room, to the dining room, then the kitchen, which passed by the back door and back towards the rear of the house. I freaked and locked the door in the front of the room and blocked the back door with my dog's metal enclosure until my grandma got back. Turns out my grandfather had been across the street the whole time, and had anything happened, he would have saved me. Since I didn't see which worker it was, my grandmother stayed with me at all times while they finished the job and sent a complaint to Lowe's in which she was compensated. I know that it was irresponsible of them to leave me alone with those men, but they are older, upwards of 60. That was one of the scariest things that ever happened to me, and I will never forget it. My mom, for the first time in her life, decided to let me stay alone at home. I'm almost 24, but being an only girl child raised by a single mother means I'm more precious than liquid gold to her. I've been away at a university abroad for 3 years, but for some reason my mom never lets me stay at home alone. Never ever. I was pretty psyched to be alone now. Unfortunately, I'm currently single, so there were no sexy times last night for me. Mom had left around 4 p.m. and I had stocked up on enough alcohol and junk food to last a week. As I said, I was not in Mumbai for the past few years and had lost touch with most of my old friends. Didn't matter, I was just here for a couple of months before going back to the UK to complete my master's. So I settled in quietly enough for the night, loaded up my DVD player with the first 2 seasons of Seinfeld and Dr. Strangelove. Weird combination, but that's me. Around 12 a.m. when I was drunk from the vodka and giddy from Seinfeld, I heard a loud meow bang outside my door. Now my mom's house is on the ground floor of this apartment complex in the Juhu Andheri vicinity. I won't be too specific. The building is 6 floors high and has 2 wings. When I was younger, a lot of cats flocked to my house as I was on the ground floor, and I provided them with food and tickles. I guess my mom didn't really encourage cats, so it was a pleasant surprise that I had some feline company. It turned out to be an orange-colored tomcat, who I immediately named Mr. Miyagi Weasley. And yes, I was that drunk. He was friendly and not too scared of human contact, so I assumed that he must be a half-pet. I gave him some water, which he gratefully drank. Temperature in Mumbai during the summer averages 38 degrees Celsius. Had tons of humidity on top of that. I didn't have cat food, so I just gave him this leftover fish thingy, and he ate that too. My mom had warned me not to open the door at night, but I figured I have security guards, plus my mom is weirdly protective. Miyagi left soon after, giving me an affectionate nose kiss and leg rub. The rest of the night was a drunken stupor, but around 3-ish I heard meows again. I assumed it was Miyagi, although the meows sounded almost metallic in a way. I opened the door and was sobered up in less than a second. Crouched down on the floor in front of my door was an old woman. She was sitting weirdly and smelled like death itself. It was as if her feet were paralyzed or something and her legs were all askew. There were open, gaping sores all over her body, and her hair was matted with this rust-brown thing. The cracks on her face seemed to run deep, like a few feet deep. Maybe the alcohol had thrown off my depth perception. It was highly disconcerting. I don't know why, but at that point I could feel a chill down my body to my hair, like my hair was electrified. I had these goosebumps and my throat went extremely dry. I'm pretty sure and that heard my heart pounding through the net door. The thing that she did next chills me even as I write this. She opened her mouth and I could see that she had 0 teeth, and let out this mechanical and eerie mew. It was so loud it seemed to reverberate around my entire house and pierce my eardrums. It bored into my skull. Her mouth was black, and the rotting smell was magnified 1,000,000 times. Ew. Her lips didn't move, the sound seemed to come from within her. Her eyes were not looking at me at first, but she slowly started looking up as if scanning my body through the door. WWEU. This one was the loudest, and I actually let go of the door to press my hands forcefully over my ears. I could feel a warm liquid trickling down from my ears to my neck. I was shivering and I was sweating. The creature finally locked eyes with me, and I swear it was looking into a portal to hell. She suddenly started to get up. It was horrific. Her limbs were creaking like an old Fiat which won't start, and each creak was loud like a whiplash. I came into my senses and bolted shut my door. Just as I did that, I felt something rub against my foot. I shrieked like a maniac and looked down to see Miyagi. He got in through my open window. My windows were still open. The blood had left my legs, so I tripped over 1,000,000 things before I shut all the windows. I immediately called the security guard through the building intercom and told him to check my lobby area as I heard something over there. He came, checked, and called me back to say there was nothing there. I was too petrified to sleep, so I just locked my bedroom door and lay in bed with Miyagi, hoping for the night to get over soon. My eyes were too weary to stay awake any longer. I checked the clock. 5:52 am. Holy cow, this had been going on for 2 hours. It felt like 10 minutes at the most. My ears had indeed leaked blood, and it had dried down from my ears to my shirt. I couldn't go and wash it off now. I was just exhausted. I'm an atheist, and I try not to believe in the paranormal, but this was no human. No human could make sounds like that, which perforated my eardrums and vibrated throughout the house. 6 and my mom would be home in 3 hours. I lay down a little more comfortably. Then I heard a WWRU outside my bedroom door, followed by 3 hard knocks. Well, to introduce myself, I'm Anu Brennan. I know it's very Irish as my parents came to America from there. Anyways, ever since I was a child, my parents never left me without at least a babysitter. Up until I was at least 17, I was always under some sort of supervision while left home alone. Although I'm 18 now and they just left for Ireland to go and see some old friends. Now I'm not entirely sure whether I'm allowed to say this or not, but other than being under constant supervision, I've never had many rules. Like, my parents aren't super strict. However, there's one rule which they've always been very insistent on. Never should I or anyone else ever go into the basement. Now that seems kinda normal cause our house is fairly old, and it could be a health danger, right? Well, I'm not completely sure. You see, when you open the door to the basement stairs, about 2 or 3 steps down is a wall. That's it, some stairs and a wall with some kind of symbol on it. The symbol looks like it's carved into it, but I've honestly never really investigated it. That is, until now. Last night, the night before my parents left, I had the worst nightmare of my life. I had opened the basement door and the wall, it just wasn't there anymore. So I did exactly what anyone else would do. I walked down the stairs. Descending the stairs, I couldn't see a single thing. Everything was completely pitch black. Although even if I couldn't see, I somehow knew exactly how to get down. Once at the foot of the stairs, I found a light switch and flicked it on. What I saw was the creepiest and all around just the strangest sight I had ever seen. Along the walls was weaponry stained in old blood. It seemed as though these hadn't been used in a while. Although standing in front of me, filling my very essence with fear and panic, yet freezing my feet to the ground, was a girl about my height wearing some kind of cloak and silver mask. On her shoulder perched a raven, its hollow black eyes sending ice through my body. The girl spoke. "It's been too long since we've last seen each other. It's time we finally meet again." And just as she finished her sentence, the raven flew directly at me, screeching the entire way until I woke up in a cold sweat at 4:20. And while that might seem weird or a marijuana reference, it happens to just be my birthday, as I was born Easter Day in 23. Now what in the hell did this girl mean? Too long since we've last seen each other. I know it was a dream, but still, I had somehow managed to fall back asleep even after that completely terrifying occurrence. My parents had woken me up to tell me they were leaving for the airport sometime later, finally giving me time to look into the basement. When the door opened, I honestly expected the wall to be gone. I was sadly mistaken. Although the symbol seemed almost deeper, it kind of resembles a raven's long beak with a quill connected to it along with two squiggly lines on the other side. I pressed my finger to it, tracing the carved wall. It sent chills down my spine, definitely put me on edge. As weird as the morning had been, I couldn't complain too much. I finally had the house all to myself. I could do whatever I wanted wherever I wanted to. Well, everything was normal until the sun had completely set. It wasn't until 10 p.m. when it started. I heard a loud thud upstairs, almost as if something had slammed into the wall outside. I thought nothing of it, as it could have just been a bird or a bat. At exactly 11 p.m. the same exact thing happened. This went on every hour on the hour, and at 12 am I swear I heard something pecking the inside of the walls. At this point I'm honestly freaking out. Why does this have to happen the second my parents leave? Why did they have to leave? Why couldn't they have taken me to Ireland with them? I stayed up all night in panic, and any time I would get close to falling asleep, the pecking noise would start up again, startling me and making it impossible to sleep. Finally, the sun rose. All the noises had stopped. I went outside to try and find any dents or anything on the wall outside where I heard the thudding noise. Nothing. There was nothing to explain what happened last night. I would tell my parents, but I'm currently too worried about ruining their time in Ireland. My mind was probably just playing tricks on me anyways. I could finally get some sleep though. Unfortunately, that means I probably won't be waking up until at least 2 p.m. It's gonna be a waste of a day. I'll survive though. I'll be sure to post an update later in the week if anything else were to happen. I hope it will. I can't be up all night again. When we first moved into our home, my husband had to go away for some work stuff. I was getting ready in the bathroom and looking at the mirror, and not kidding, I felt something grab my butt. Where the mirror is, the doorway is close by, so there's a possibility of me not seeing something in the reflection. My husband does funny things like that sometimes, but it was hard. I turned to greet him, half in confusion and half in surprise, because normally he's pretty gentle with me, but literally nothing was there. Later that week I was washing dishes and a rusty screw fell and hit me in the shoulder. The light fixture above me was brand new. I have always had weird feelings when I'm alone at home. I was 13 and my dad worked a second job a couple nights a week until 2 am. Normally my older sister would be home, but not always. I had just seen the movie When a Stranger Calls and was a little afraid of going upstairs to bed alone in the house. I felt like a baby though, so I steeled my nerves and told myself to just do it. I had been laying in my bed for about 30 minutes when I heard what sounded like someone trotting down the steps. The steps were right next to my bedroom. I jumped out of bed, so much for my plan of feigning sleep, and stood and listened. I didn't hear our front door open. Scared shitless, I opened my door and peeked down the steps. No one. Went down into the living room. No one. Front door locked, back door locked. No pets. No loose ball. No one there. The footsteps were plain as day. 44 years later, and I don't know what that was. Spent the next few hours every light on in a chair by the front door waiting for my dad. Halloween weekend 2017. Saturday night, I rubber band my ID, debit card, credit card, and some cash together and place it in a smaller going out bag. Get back to my boyfriend's house with all of my belongings that night. Wake up Sunday morning and get ready to take the Bright Line to Miami. Putting my things back into my main purse, and my ID and debit card are nowhere to be found, but strangely the cash and credit card are still rubber banded together. Scramble to my house to get my passport so I have some form of ID. Passport, cash, and credit card all get tucked into a zippered pocket inside my purse. Have ourselves a Sunday in Miami. It's around 10 p.m. and I'm sitting on the train to come home and get this overwhelming feeling to look inside the zippered pocket. ID and debit card are sitting on top of my passport. Immediately thought it was a prank by a BF, but quickly realized there was no way for him to have placed my things back in my purse without me noticing, as it was on my body all day. Cried myself to sleep that night. It freaked me out so badly. It still bothers me to this day. I'm from Ohio and lived in an apartment as a kid. Sometimes I would get a strange feeling in different homes or areas. Me wife thinks I can feel energies. One night at the apartment I woke up because I had to pee, but I had a very strong sensation not to go out my room. I was laying in bed holding, and I started to hear someone in my kitchen, like footsteps and a cabinet opening. If I opened my door to my bedroom, there would be a hallway, and directly across from my door is an entrance to our kitchen. To get to the bathroom, I would have to make a left. I couldn't hold my pee anymore and convince myself I was just being crazy. I finally got up to open my door. As soon as I opened the door, already scared and creeped out, a woman was standing in the kitchen in the dark. I was so shocked and in disbelief because this stuff is not real. Then I realized it was just my mom. It was only a few seconds, but the relief washed over me, and I walked through my door into the hallway. As I did this, I was face to face with her. It was not my mom. It was a woman in a nightgown similar to what my mom would wear, not old-timey or anything like that. As I looked at her, she seemed just as startled as me. I was thinking she broke into our home. As I was looking her over face to face, she didn't have legs. It was like her upper body was completely normal, but as her nightgown went down, her legs faded into a mist. This all only lasted a few seconds. As I realized she had no legs, her whole body kind of faded into the mist. I was still in disbelief, so I walked through the kitchen and checked the couch to see if my mom was in there. She was not. I woke her up and asked her if she was in the kitchen. She said I was just dreaming and to go back to bed. I don't know if I hallucinated it because I was scared and just a child, but it was very real to me, and I don't understand what happened. Throughout the years, I try to look up those apartments and see if anybody said they saw anything on the internet. The only thing I know is one of my friends was older, but a good kid mom had cancer and had recently died in a downstairs apartment on the other side of our building. I wasn't exactly home alone, but it is pretty close to it. When I was around 9-ish, I was left alone with my sister, who was 13 at the time. My mother had gone on a walk with our dog around town. So I was in my living room watching TV and my sister was upstairs. Out of the blue, I hear an alarm almost like a fire detector, so I go to see where the sound is coming from. My sister comes down and we are both trying to find this sound. It's none of the fire detectors, so we are puzzled where this is coming from. My sister opens the oven to see if it is coming from there while I go check around. We both go out to the living room to look out there, when all of a sudden we both hear the oven open and close. Nobody was in the kitchen, and we were sure it was that sound because my sister had just opened and shut the oven, and it sounded exactly like that. So we ran and hid behind a rocking chair, all the while an alarm was still going off. My sister called my mom, and she hurried home. Almost exactly when she hung up, the alarm stopped. To this day, we still have no idea where the sound came from. The thing is, it's not that absurd from all the stuff we have experienced in this house. It is fairly old, being that it was built in the 1800s. The most predominant spot this happens is in the living room, and there have been some really out-of-pocket things that have happened. Some things happening as recent as a couple weeks ago. By the time I'd finished middle school, my parents trusted me to be alone in the house by myself for long periods of time. We're talking days at a time. They did this so someone could care for our elderly dog who needed attention and supervision 24/7. With this, my parents would sometimes go out of state on a small vacation for the weekend, leaving me in the house by myself. Back to the present, it was a chilly fall evening. My parents had left early Friday morning and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. Everything had gone smoothly, and I was having a good time finally getting the house to myself. Until Saturday. When my parents left, I brought my gaming console out into the living room along with some pillows and a blanket, figuring my dog slept in the living room. I'd sleep out there with her in case she needed me in the middle of the night. It was getting to be around dinner time. After I fed my dog, I texted my mom, asking for a bit of money to order a pizza because I didn't feel like cooking that night. I ordered the pizza and sat on the couch playing a shooting game until the time had passed and I heard the doorbell ring. I got up and quickly threw on my jacket and went to look through the peephole. There stood the pizza guy, a medium-height, middle-aged looking guy. He had dirty blonde hair and eye bags seeming like he hadn't slept in a year. I could smell the dirty stench of cigarettes through my door. He had his eyes fixed on the camera doorbell, with a worried look on his face. I unlocked the door and opened it the equivalent to my body width and greeted him with a smile. His eyes darted over to me. A small, creepy grin grew on his face. "Oh, I wasn't expecting a young girl like you," he said. Gross, I thought. Confused on how to answer, I replied in a quiet giggle. I held out my hands to take my food. "So, how old are you?" the man asked, still grinning. "Sorry, man, I don't answer questions like that," I said, even more creeped out than before. He huffed, seeming to get frustrated. I placed the pizza boxes down on the couch next to me and reached into my pocket to hand him the tip I had planned to give him. "Are your parents home?" he asked. Lying, I replied, "Yeah, they're in the other room." I hoped he would believe me and just go, seeing as my parents took my mom's car on vacation, leaving my dad's car in the driveway. He scoffed and said, "You know, I like that game too. Do you like shooters?" referring to my paused game screen on the TV behind me. I became increasingly annoyed, but I didn't want to be rude and just slammed the door in his face. "Yeah, sure, look, I'm sorry, but I have to go now," I said, trying everything I could to get this man to leave me the hell alone. The man scowled. He took the tip and crumpled it in his hand and started muttering profanities under his breath, but I only could make out one phrase before I shut the door. "You're gonna regret this." I locked the door and anxiously watched carefully from the window to make sure he got back in his car. I didn't stop watching until he sped off around the corner. I let out a sigh of relief and did a quick sweep around the house and made sure all the windows and doors were locked. A couple of hours had passed until I decided I was going to lay down and watch TV for the night until I fell asleep. I made sure my dog was tended to and laid down. Before I noticed, I had drifted off, completely forgetting the interaction I had earlier in the day. When I woke up, it was still dark outside, 2 in the morning-ish. My dog was barking like crazy, and not a "I want to go outside" bark. An alarmed, "I see a stranger" kind of bark. If you have a dog, you understand this, and you know what they're indicating to you. I propped myself up on my elbows and stretched for a second. Looked around for a bit and didn't see anything. I was about to lay back down until I noticed it in the corner of my eye. A face. In the window to my right, I saw the same man from earlier, grinning again. He waved at me, still smiling but looking more sinister by the second. I felt my blood run cold. Why is he here? How long had he been watching me sleep? I shot up, my fight or flight triggered instantly. I ran to my room and pulled the baseball bat out from underneath my bed and walked back to the living room where I had been sleeping, clutching it in hand. When I went back, the man had moved from the window to the front door, knocking gently. "Let's hang out and have some fun," I heard him say from outside. "I'm gonna call the police if you don't get the hell away from my house," I yelled back. He banged on the door, violently aggressive this time. "The hell you will, you little brat," he screamed. The doorknob shook violently. My dog was going mad at this point, so I took her with me and locked myself into my room and dialed 911 on my phone. I was explaining what was happening when I heard a couple loud bangs. He was throwing himself at my front door to try to bust through it. I had texted my parents, and they had already packed and started driving back. But all of that left my mind when I heard the front door burst open and fall onto the ground of my living room. I whispered into my phone to the 911 operator that the man had broken into my house, and the person on the other end of the line instructed me to stay quiet and sit tight as the police were minutes away. Before I could think of anything, my phone died and I started panicking. I quietly went over and shut my bedroom lights off and hid in my closet with my dog, petting her as to make sure she wouldn't bark and reveal our hiding spot. I heard the man walking through my house, searching under tables, behind couches, and in hallway closets. He stopped walking for a moment. I could hear him directly outside my bedroom door. He shook the handle and huffed that same way before, indicating he was becoming frustrated. There was a couple bangs on the door before he was able to punch a hole through my door, but enough to fit his hand through to unlock it. I heard the lock. It gave a small click sound before the door creaked open. It was pitch black in my room. The man took a step in and stood there. Seconds felt like hours. I cupped my hand over my mouth to quiet my anxious breathing. I heard him rummaging through my belongings. He looked under the bed, under my desk. Then the last to hide. He had his hand on the closet door. I'm dead, I thought. I didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. Before he had the chance to open the closet, my prayers were answered, and I heard the sirens of police getting closer and closer. Damn it, the man whispered. He exited my bedroom and ran through my home. I heard the back door slide open and the crunching footsteps through the dead grass. The 911 operator must have told the police where I was, and I felt like I could finally breathe again when an officer opened the closet door and told me it was okay to come out. They led me outside with my dog and leash, and I sat on the edge of the set in the police car. I waited there as the police searched my house in case the man had still been there. The police said there were no signs anything was stolen. He wasn't there for valuables. He was looking for me. That fact will disturb me till the day I die. There were many signs that it had been a break-in, so the case stayed open for a while, but eventually closed. The guy was never found, and it wasn't known where he was. His identity was found, and this man had passed warrants for home invasions and failure to appear in court. The fact that he was never caught and is still out there somewhere shakes me to my core. But I know for sure I'm never ever opening the door for anybody ever again when I'm home alone. I was at the coffee house on my phone when I received a really creepy text. Hi, Carly. It was from an unknown caller. I instantly looked up and scanned the lounge as I felt eyes on me. There was a little kid being carried by his mom, staring. Well, after a moment I realized his gaze wasn't on me, but at my half-finished iced coffee. This was an old coffee house, larger than most, which had been converted from a church. The stained glass windows let in fantastic light during the day, and at night the moonlight created a natural blue rim around the outside, which was beautiful. It was my favorite place to hang out and people watch. Sometimes I'd sit in the corner making up stories about what people did, about where they were going next, or where they had been. This text message needed a reply. Who is this? I know you have a boyfriend, but you are really cute. Well, he was right that I had a boyfriend, and I'm glad he thought I was cute, but there was something instantly off about it. Perhaps that he was texting in lowercase. Who is this? He replied instantly. You don't know me. No shit, Sherlock, is what I wanted to respond. But I was more curious. How did you get my number? Because you're pretty. Again, another compliment, but he didn't answer my question. My creep radar was up, and you probably give good kisses. Creepy alert confirmed. It was nearly 9:15 at night, and this place was emptying out, so I felt a little uneasy. But I wanted to know how he knew my name and number. I want to kiss your lips. Jesus, enough with coming on to me so hard. Didn't he realize he was creepy? I assumed he was a complete stranger, but just wanted to make sure. Have we met? If I testify about myself, my testimony is not valid. John 5:31. Maybe he's trying to be creepy, or perhaps he thinks I'll share his love of the Bible. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. John 14:27. I thought of something funny and cute to write back, but then thought it might offend him. But a few moments later, I sent it, wanting to see how he'd react. Well, John, I've seen people like you before, but I had to pay admission. Carly, 9:15 p.m. You're uber cute, and I want you for myself. Nice. So how did you get my number? I'm at the same coffee house as you. I was looking over your shoulder. Wait, this guy had been watching me text Frank, my boyfriend. It made sense. That's how he got my number and knew my name. Who the actual FK does something like that? I ordered you a coffee. I hope I got it right. They should be calling the lovely Carly any minute. I wasn't staying around to receive it. As I walked to my car, I texted back. The lovely Carly thanks you but isn't interested. You can keep it. You just got up and left? Yeah. Did he really think now I'd drink his coffee and wait for a physical introduction? It also went through my head that maybe he was the barista, and that upcoming coffee was spiked with something bad. I had no idea who he was, but as I got to my car, I subtly checked to see if anyone was coming out. Do you know how I like my coffee? Just like my women, ground up, tightly wrapped in a bag, chilling in my freezer. Frank had told me a fun thing to send people once. This was a perfect time. From 9 to 30, the recipient you are sending to has chosen not to receive messages. MSG 2108. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every authority instituted among me. Peter 13. He hadn't followed me from the store, but I still had this gut feeling I was being watched. It was then I noticed this car on the other side of the parking lot, which sat in the darkness with its lights off. I could tell someone was in there, and all my intuition told me it was him. As I pulled away, I received another Bible text. I might fill them with horror so they would know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel 20:25. I put the phone on my dashboard and switched it to speech to text so that I could speak to Frank. My eyes were pinned to that car, and right as I was about to turn out of the parking lot, its lights turned on. He was following me, keeping at a distance. He made every turn I made. Frank offered to leave work early and meet me at home, but I decided it wasn't necessary. I could look after myself. As I watched him behind me, he kept his distance. Just the way he drove, I could tell he'd done this before. When I got to my apartment complex, I parked quickly, noticing him pull into a guest spot. As I walked to my front door, I pulled out my keys. I noticed him got out of his car. I'd been taught how to use a key as a weapon, so I was prepared. But nervously, I still fumbled with the keys and dropped them. As I reached down, I caught him in the distance coming towards me. Quickly, I picked them up, got in, and locked the door. I live in a townhouse, which is 3 floors. When you go in, stairs lead directly up to my main space. I beelined up the stairs, immediately turning on the lights. But then I thought, with the lights on, from outside he could see me. So I turned them off. I ducked, then crawled over to the kitchen window, and saw him in the parking lot. He was staring up. It was like he was staring directly at me, but I figured it was too dark for him to see me, and he was scoping out my building to see if I lived alone. I sat there in the dark for a good 10 minutes. The man outside walked towards my apartment but disappeared out of view. My heart raced with anticipation as my eyes locked upon the second-floor balcony. Suddenly a hand clasped onto the railing outside. The creepy man was climbing up. I went to a kitchen drawer and grabbed the sharpest knife I had, then sat there, watching him on the balcony. He pressed his forehead against the glass, looking in. I sat there, hoping the darkness would hide me. Both the window and sliding doors were locked. He had no way in without alerting me. I quickly ran up the stairs to my bedroom and texted Frank that the man was on our second-floor balcony. Frank texted back right away. You left a window open so he could get in, right? It costs a lot to replace broken glass. Oh my God, I didn't. I raced back downstairs and crept to the sliding doors. Silently, I lifted the latch, then rushed back up. I filmed the whole thing on my cell to send to Frank, which he always appreciated. I put on my mask, which I wear for all my kills, and turned up the music loud. I put the shower on, hoping it would inspire the man to enter. As I waited in the bedroom, I was so excited. At the same time, I feared he wouldn't commit. I wondered if I'd have to go back downstairs to look. That would actually be scary, as he could jump out at me any time. As I stood on the bed, my eyes pinned on the door, the handle turned. I was so excited and readied the knife. As he entered, I leaped forward and got him right in the neck. I forget the song that was playing but shifted the blade around to the beats and the music. That was so much fun. The downside of the whole thing was that this FKR had a lot of blood, which got on the carpet. I keep meaning to lay something down to quicken the cleanup time, but like the idiot I am, I keep forgetting. I also forget if he begged for help. There have been so many of them, they somewhat blend in with one another. It's incredible how many creeps come out of the cracks when you're fishing for them. The next night I was back at the coffee house. I dressed as sexy as I could, hoping to lure another one's attention. Frank texted me to be careful. You don't want to get a caffeine addiction, wow. When I was younger, I used to live in this super old, shitty house in the middle of the woods. There was a small clearing with an average-sized yard and the rest was thick woods. One night I was walking up to our gate to go inside and I seen a very tall figure looking in my bedroom window. My light was on, which was weird since I hadn't been in there or turned it on, so I could see the figure with its face and hands pressed up against my window. Whatever or whoever it was must have heard me because they looked in my direction before booking it to the back of the yard, and presumably into the woods since there was nowhere else to go and the backyard area wasn't fenced in. I never slept in that room again. A while ago, on a quiet night at home, I found myself engrossed in a lively phone call with friends. The atmosphere was relaxed, and the conversation flowed effortlessly until an unexpected interruption shook the tranquility of the night. Out of nowhere, my usually calm and slumbering dog erupted into a frenzy of barks. Bewildered by this sudden outburst, I excused myself from the call and decided to investigate the unusual disturbance. Cautiously making my way downstairs, I could still hear the persistent barking echoing through the house. As I approached the source of the commotion, I discovered my dog fixated on the hall closet, his fur bristling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Sensing an unease, I felt compelled to investigate further. Instinctively, I retrieved the baseball bat I kept in my room for moments just like this, those rare instances when an unexpected visitor or an unexplained noise might warrant a bit of extra caution. Gripping the bat tightly, I steeled myself for whatever might await me inside the closet. Upon swinging the door open, the initial glance revealed nothing out of the ordinary. The dim light struggled to penetrate the closet's depths, casting elongated shadows on the walls. My dog's barking continued, now more intense, as if urging me to delve deeper into the mystery. Taking a hesitant step forward, I cast my eyes downward and noticed a glint of something familiar at the closet's floor. There, nestled among forgotten shoes and discarded items, lay a delicate necklace, the very same necklace my mother had lost when I was a mere 9 years old. My heart skipped a beat as I gingerly picked up the precious item. The pendant sparkled with memories, and the chain felt cool against my skin. Stunned and perplexed, I raced back upstairs, my faithful dog trailing behind me. Resuming the phone call with my friends, I interrupted their conversation with an incredulous retelling of the strange discovery. The necklace, lost for years, had resurfaced in the most unexpected way. The following morning, still baffled by the inexplicable events of the night, I shared the discovery with my mom over breakfast. Her eyes widened in disbelief as I presented the long-lost necklace. She recounted the memories attached to it and confirmed that she hadn't seen it since that fateful day years ago. To this day, the mystery remains unsolved. How did my dog sense the presence of the necklace in the depths of the closet? And why did it reappear after all these years? The odd occurrence has become a tale shared among friends and family, a reminder that sometimes the mysteries of life find their way back to us in the most unexpected fashion. I didn't have many friends, and I wasn't very social when I was growing up. I preferred being alone and doing things on my own. One thing I liked doing was going for long walks in dark parks or forests at night. It was a bit unusual, I know, but it made me feel better, and I enjoyed it. I always took my phone with me for safety. At that time, I was around 18 years old, and I was a man. I was probably about 6 feet 1 inch tall back then, but I grew a bit more between the ages of 20 and 23, and now I'm around 6 feet 3 inches tall. There's one story from those walks that still frightens me today. In fact, after that incident, I stopped going for walks in the darkened forests and parks. So, one evening, I decided to go out and get some more therapy by just walking in the dark park. It does require some bravery, especially if you're scared of that sort of thing, but once you overcome the fear, it's really relaxing. I always made sure to have my phone with me, which had a flashlight app in case of emergencies or if I needed some light. However, I never really encountered anyone during my walks. I usually went between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. By that time, most dog walkers had finished their walks, especially during cold and wet winter nights. Occasionally, I would come across someone, maybe once a week, but they always had a light with them, so I could see where they were, and I would simply avoid them. There were a few times when some people noticed me during my walks, and I might have startled them because they would shine their bright flashlights towards me. They'd probably just saw a guy walking around in the dark without a light or a dog. Oh well, that's how it goes. Now let me tell you about this particular story that happened one night. It was winter, and I decided to go for a walk on a very foggy evening. It was incredibly cold and crisp, one of those dry and chilly nights. The fog was so thick that I could barely see more than 5 or 10 meters ahead of me. It was pretty bad, and I had never experienced such fog during my evening walks before. But it didn't make me more scared than usual, so it wasn't a problem for me. I got maybe 10 minutes into the walk, and I came through a forest path and out into an opening of a big field. The field is connected to our local school and basically has football pitches drawn around it and athletics tracks drawn in white paint. Obviously, it's not the professional synthetic tracks that you see at the Olympics on TV. It was just a grass track and a grass football pitch. But I stood there, and I didn't feel right. Now, I don't really believe in superstitious things or paranormal activity, but I was just stood there with no light on. I decided to stop walking all of a sudden and just stand still. Now, bear in mind, here I am stood in a field. The opening must have been around 2 miles long and 2 miles wide. There's nothing but a massive clearing, and I can really just see nothing until maybe past 10 meters. Out of nowhere, I start seeing something move through the fog. I didn't know if I was just seeing things because sometimes when it's super dark, your eyes play games on you. They start to make you feel like you are hallucinating, and if you look hard enough into darkness, you'll start seeing all these lights and things. I don't know if it's just me, but it was something I used to experience as normal. It's like when you try to listen to complete silence, you still hear a ringing in your ears or some kind of sound. I call it white noise. Well, in this case, I like to call it white vision. So I ignored it, thinking it was just white vision. But then these shadows started coming closer. They must have been about 30 meters away. Remember, I could barely see anything beyond 10 meters because the fog was so strong and thick that night. So, there I am, standing there with my hoodie on and my hands in my pockets to keep warm. At the time, I think I had a pair of night gloves on as well, but they weren't of much use as my fingers were starting to go numb. I really was getting super spooked at this point, thinking, was this just white vision, or was I actually experiencing something? Was there someone out there also without a light? So, in all the years I've been doing this walk at night or by myself without a light, I have never encountered anyone without a torch. The torch acted as a warning, so I knew where people were. You can see them for miles when they shine lights. It's a pretty cool fact I learned on a Special Forces Day, whereas basically at one of the open fairs, they used to say that they turn all the lights off. Otherwise, the enemies would be able to locate them based on where their light is. So, I'm still there, and I'm sure that now I can see someone walking directly towards me. I couldn't make out if it was 2 or 3 people, but it looked like multiple shadows. Now I'm in the middle of nowhere, and the closest road to me is around a mile away that I had just walked onto through to get into the forest. I had my phone with me, but I didn't have any weapons or a way to defend myself if I came across someone dangerous, someone worse than me. As they got closer, about 40 to 30 meters away, I realized there was another person walking alone in that open area covered by fog without a flashlight. It hit me, but I realized that if I stayed still and tried to talk to them, it might scare them just like they scared me. Maybe they didn't even notice that I was there standing right in front of them, 30 meters away. So I quickly made the decision to turn around and go in the opposite direction. So I start pace walking as quietly as I can on the grass. I didn't make much noise at all, but I knew for certain this was somebody now walking behind me. They got close enough though that I could see an outline of what somebody looked like to be 6 feet, maybe even taller than me, wearing black clothing with short hair. I don't know if they could make out where I was or if they even saw me, but I'm guessing as I turned around and pivoted my hips to start pace walking back, they realized that I was there. I've never walked so fast in my life, and I remember literally breaking out to a run once I thought that they could no longer see me. I ran home after that night, getting super spooked. After all the months and eventually years of walking alone, doing the therapy in the dark in that park, I actually realized that I just bumped into someone just like me. It was either that or they actually were a psycho or a criminal looking to try and abduct me. Probably when my dog died and he visited me in a dream 2 weeks later to let me know he loves me and he's at peace. I know people will say it's just a dream, but unless you experienced it, I can't even explain it to you. It was just as vivid as my waking life, to the point that I remember seeing his individual whiskers, and I still remember it beginning to end 5 years later. In addition, as soon as he laid on my lap, there was this insane feeling of euphoria and peace that just vibrated through my whole body. I used to be a heroin addict, and I've never even felt euphoria like that while on heroin, was almost a decade sober at the time it happened, FYI. He was with me then, and no one will ever be able to tell me otherwise. I just hope other people get to experience the same thing sometime when they lose a loved one. I'm atheist, but that dream was so crazy that it convinced me without a doubt there is some sort of afterlife and I'll see him again.